What is going on, Sports Wars? We're here. We are live. I know it's been a while since we got to do this show. We've both been traveling, this thing or that thing, whatever. But finally, for week 10, we decided there's enough going on in the NFL and college football that we probably need to do another one of these Against the Spread with Robert Barnes from sportspicks.locals.com. Robert, how you doing?
Doing good. In sports picks, we're profitable in the NFL, profitable in college football, profitable in European football. Last year, won big 5% bets on all the big major sports, including March Madness and the NBA Finals. So if you want to have the odds in your favor, there's no better place than sportspicks.locals.com.
There you go. And, it has been a wild past couple weeks with some things that we didn't get to talk about, like, Josh McDaniels now gone from the Raiders. Antonio Pierce comes in his first game and certainly helped that Daniel Jones gets injured. But in his first game as head coach, and the Raiders look motivated. They look like a different team against a terrible offense for the Giants that night, obviously. But what are your feelings about how all that went down and Josh McDaniels finally gets the boot? Probably too little too late, but it seemed like a move that had to be made.
Absolutely. I mean, I was not a Josh McDaniels head coaching fan from his Broncos days, but at least the offense was good, and it was terrible this year. And so it was clear he had lost the locker room. Never believed he was a good head coach. You look at most of the Patriots assistants, Belichick assistants, most of them have not turned out to be great head coaches, or like Nick Saban assistants. Most of them have not. You look at the one or two that have. A lot of them were very independent careers, separate from Saban. Same with Belichick, really. I mean, go to the history of all of his assistants that get hired. They're more likely to be duds than successes. And he had already proven he wasn't a success at Denver. And because he gets to coach Tom Brady a few more years, you give him a second shot. And the Raiders were clearly in trouble. And that, the last disastrous game was the final straw. And you see them as a much more ready to go team. Now, the fact that Jimmy G is on the bench after they spent the money to get him, suggests other issues, and the GM was fired along with the head coach. So the Raiders are a better team than they've played like under McDaniels. So I think that they're underdogs this week to the Jets. I think maybe undeservedly so, but it was bound to come. And the only question was how long he was going to last. And he just didn't make it past the 2-year mark. I really don't think he'll get a third bite at the apple after this.
I doubt it. Not the way it would be one thing if win a couple years at one place, just didn't work out for one reason or another. But the way he went into both places, getting rid of talented players, bringing in his own people, stuff like this, and to have it just blow up in his face both times, I think it's just I think it's too embarrassing for him to really get another shot at a head coaching job, at least anytime soon. But yeah, the craziest part was they were ready to stick with him throughout the rest of the year, but they had a players-only meeting. And players-only meeting went okay. Antonio Pierce spoke for the coaches to provide their perspective on what the players needed to be doing. And in the speech, Antonio Pierce, former New York Giant, talked about how they have to have that attitude, that they can do anything. They can win every single game anytime they walk in there. And he brought up the Giants' victory against the 2007 New England Patriots as one of the big things to show you can do anything. And after the meeting was over, after everyone was good, Josh McDaniels got really pissed and got into a yelling match with Antonio Pierce. Say, don't talk about my Patriots that way. And that's what led another big schism. And Mark Davis said, all right, fuck you. I'm done with Josh McDaniels. We're going with Antonio Pierce. What a wild, wild turn of events. And speaking of the Raiders, we got Dom H in the chat for $10 saying, Ryan, I know a Raiders fan that has a trade that will knock your socks off. Jimmy G for the Bears' #1 pick. What do you think? No, I don't think so. I don't think that'll do it. The Bears already made a mistake of trading the #1 overall draft pick. I hope they do not do it again when they get it, because I do think they will get, if we can fucking beat Carolina at least, I think we'll get the Carolina #1 draft pick. At least I hope so. Knowing the Bears, they'll find a way to screw it up. But also speaking of the New England Patriots and Josh McDaniels, there's a story out there that seems a little bit too crazy to believe. that it would end this way after all the titles, after all the winning. But since Tom Brady left, there hasn't been too much winning in New England. And now there's actually articles out there, Robert, talking about and reports talking about Bill Belichick potentially being fired in the middle of this season if they lose this game over in Europe against the Colts this week. It seems crazy, but you even have this. Patriots view Mike Vrabel and Nick Caserio as home run replacements for Bill Belichick per report. Now, you and I think both are on the same page. Yeah, Bill Belichick struggled obviously without Tom Brady, and they're 2-7 or whatever this year. But do you see this guy getting replaced in the middle of the season after everything him and Robert Kraft have gone through?
And I see there's no chance. You can't fire a legend that brought you that many Super Bowls mid-season for a bad year. And it's not like every season's been a bad year since Brady. He's had some decent seasons, and this one's been bad. But that's basically because he doesn't have the quarterback that he needs. And before his defensive injuries, the defense was one of the better defenses in the league. Hemming in the Eagles, hemming in the Dolphins. So I don't see any chance that Belichick gets fired. And it's not like there's an obvious successor. It's not like there's a quarterback that's our star that's being held back. Nothing like that. All it'll do is enrage the fans for letting go of a legend. So I don't see that happening. I also don't see why a guy like Vrabel would leave Tennessee, where he's got a good job, to go to New England. What's the point? And it's not like if Vrabel was at the Patriots, they would be no better. I mean, this is a team that doesn't have a receiving core, doesn't have a quarterback, and now has defensive injuries. So, I mean, what they need is, to the degree Belichick has exercised personnel control, what there probably should be is somebody else exercising that personnel control, because he hasn't proven consistent in that aspect of his management of the team. But I see no chance. I remember a couple of weeks ago, they were saying there's a chance he could be fired, that his contract hadn't been extended. And it turned out his contract had been extended. So, so they'd be paying a big severance payment. But I just don't see, he's earned too much goodwill. He would have to have, I think, another bad season before he would be fired. And even then, it would be only at the end of that season. I don't see any chance it happens with it either at any time during this year.
I just don't see Bob Kraft as that kind of guy with everything that they've been through to do that to Bill Belichick. And I think Belichick doesn't want to go out this way for sure, but I also don't think they're going to give him unlimited time, right? If he goes, say he wins 2 games this year, and then he wins 3 games next year, I think they'll pull the plug. I don't think he has an unlimited leash. But I think when you're a guy, regardless of how many you won with Tom Brady and we haven't done without it, I just can't see them getting rid of a legend like Belichick.
I mean, I think there's more possibility if Belichick feels unloved or not going to have progress in New England, that he leaves for, the Raiders or someplace else where he thinks he could have a fresh start, a better team, etc.
Well, I don't know if the Raiders can afford him, because at this point in time, the Raiders are now paying about $90 million to 2 coaches who are not there anymore, John Gruden and Josh McDaniels.
They never should have fired Gruden. And they're probably the NFL is probably going to lose that lawsuit.
I hope so, because it was bullshit what happened to John Gruden, undoubtedly. But there's also obviously some big drama going on in college football. It's been going on for the past couple of weeks. Michigan Wolverines have been under intense scrutiny, a big cheating scandal, sign stealing scandal that went on with Connor Stallions, who has since resigned from the program. The Big Ten is being pressured by other football coaches within the Big Ten to punish Jim Harbaugh now, because the NCAA is not going to do anything probably till after the season's over, after they complete their investigation. There's pressure for them to do it right now. And Michigan actually just recently submitted basically their reasoning to the Big Ten on why they don't think they should be punished right now, the premature discipline. And they've also revealed some other big things, like the fact that other Big Ten teams have been caught, and they have documentation that in 2022, not only did they steal some signs from Michigan, maybe in a legal way, maybe in a way that was allowed, but then they colluded and shared those signs with other people in the Big Ten, namely Ohio State, Purdue, my Purdue Boilermakers, and Rutgers were the teams that were named. This could open a whole can of worms. And I guarantee you right now, as much as people might like to see Michigan get punished or whatever, and if they broke the letter of the law, they should be punished in some way. I'm not saying they shouldn't. But I guarantee there's a whole lot of coaches right now that are getting very nervous about the attention this is getting because they probably all know that something somewhere in their program, you have some similar things, some shady shit that's going on in terms of trying to decipher your opponent's signs.
Yeah, it's am I surprised that Harbaugh is baby Belichick when it comes to the rules of the college football? Not exactly, but I mean, he used to run it up when he was at Stanford whenever he got the chance. So his idea of being a good sport is a little bit different than everybody else's, and he's a hyper competitive. But it does feel like it's relatively minor. In other words, this doesn't feel like a real stolen edge. If you were lazy or sloppy enough to make it so that your signals could get stolen, I don't really feel that much sympathy for you. And so I'm not overly, there's been, bigger scandals, people stealing playbooks and things like that. But in the modern league where you have so many digital, filming capacities out there, I just don't see this as a real scandal. And I can't see them with Michigan with a chance to be in the playoffs, play for the national title. I don't see the Big Ten taking any action. I don't see the NCAA taking any major action.
And you kind of understand why everyone's sitting there on edge and like really we're kind of screwed situation, because let's just say Michigan beats Ohio State, wins the Big Ten, regardless of whether they have their signs or not, goes to the college football playoff, and oh my gosh, wins the national title. And then 2 weeks later, the NCAA punishment comes down. So you understand why people are obviously sitting there very worried. If Michigan was sitting there at 4-5, no chance of playing in a title game, it wouldn't matter, right? No one would really care whether they got punished right now or not. But since it has massive national and Big Ten implications, there's a lot of people that are invested. But, it's one thing. Advanced scouting is not allowed. You can't send some guy to a game with a fucking hat and sunglasses on, filming the sidelines to break stuff down. But everybody still is able to find out what other people's signs are from games or whatever. But would you rather have that capability, the capability to film somebody's sidelines on a cell phone, then sit there, try to match it up to all the plays and figure out what these guys' signs are? Or do you think it's more worse cheating to be handed somebody's homework that's already been done? They've done all that work. They did the advanced scouting. They deciphered all their signs. And then you're passing around from team to team in the Big Ten because you don't want Michigan to win. I would take the work that's already done. I think that's worse. I think that's more egregious, to be honest, than what Michigan is alleged to have done. Either way, I don't think people should be breaking the rules. I think they try to a lot. And if you get caught, I think you should be punished. But the Michigan situation is very interesting. The Big Ten's feeling a lot of pressure to do something. But at the end of the day, I don't see how you can punish Michigan in the middle of the season before you've actually completed the investigation. I think that would be awful if they did.
Agreed.
All right. Let's actually get into college football, because the first game on the docket happens to be a big Michigan game. And really, let's just be real, it's Michigan's first game of the year. It's their first actual game of the year. I think their other quality win besides this is like Purdue and Rutgers, ironically. But Michigan, number 3 Michigan for right now, is headed to play Penn State. 8-1 Penn State, ranked 10th in the country.
Yeah, and I don't think they need to steal any Penn State signs to stop that offense, because that offense stops itself. Other than last week's game against Maryland, it's just not, despite how highly touted that quarterback is, that Penn State offense has been anemic. And even with the talented running backs, they just haven't been able to get going. And on the flip side, the Penn State run defense has been the best, arguably the best in all of college football. Pass defense has been a little bit vulnerable. They lost a couple of great corners, including one that's playing for the Steelers. So they're not quite as strong back there. But basically, Penn State's going to need to lean heavily on their defense to have any shot at this game. And the big question for me all year has been, how much better is that Michigan passing game really? Last year, they hit some big plays. This year, their explosive plays are actually down from where they were last year, particularly plays over 30 yards. And that was against a very anemic, as you mentioned, schedule defensively. I mean, Rutgers, I guess, is the best defense they face. That's not exactly a great defense, not a great pass defense by any measurement. So if Michigan's QB is legit, if they really have figured out a highly capable passing game, because I don't think they're going to be able to run the ball against Penn State. Penn State's been hearing about those 400-plus rushing yards all offseason that they gave up last year in Ann Arbor, and they've really stacked that run defense. So I just don't see Michigan being able to run the ball. So this game comes down to me to one thing: is Michigan's passing game legit? I think they'll do enough to win. They're favored by 4.5 to 5, depending on where you get it. Expected score of like 24-20, 25-20, something like that. I think that's high on Penn State's offensive total. I'd be very surprised if Penn State gets to 20. I'm not all that sure that Michigan's easily going to get 25, 26, or 27. If that passing game really they've figured it out, and what we've seen all year against weaker competition is legit, then yeah, they'll win like 27-10 or something. If not, it could be a lot like that Ohio State Penn State game. Finish 20-6. It could be a very low scoring game. I think Penn State's offense is so bad, and it's not a whiteout. It's not a night game. It's a noon kickoff game. I think Penn State's just doesn't have the offensive capacity to stick with Michigan either way. But I don't know if Michigan's offensive passing ability is as good as it appears to be from a very anemic schedule. So I think Michigan will take care of business, but it could be like an old school Big Ten low score. I mean, like a 6-3, honestly, wouldn't surprise me. I'd probably lean under if I would lean any direction in this game, but I don't think Penn State has the offensive ability to hang with. They would need a bunch of breaks to go their way, or a very unusual offensive game plan. Now, we really don't know much about Michigan's defense. It's looked dominant all year, but also hasn't really faced anybody that's any good offensively. I mean, it reminds me of like those old Nebraska teams from the 80s that like played nobody until they got into the bowl game. And so you didn't know for sure just how good they were. Or some of those Oklahoma teams under Barry Switzer, like they played one game all year, which was Nebraska usually. I mean, otherwise there was pretty much nobody on that Big 8 schedule. And sometimes happened with USC, sometimes happened with the Miami, sporadically over the years. This is the worst schedule I can remember any top 4 team playing this late in the year, where basically nobody on that schedule should even be a bowl team to a certain degree. I mean, none of them are top 50 teams by any legit power rating that I see. Now they're going to play, Maryland is a decent challenge on the road, though they weren't last week for Penn State. But basically, it's a 2-game schedule for Michigan. It's at Penn State and Ohio State at home, in Ann Arbor, and that's basically it. And if so, they're going to be in the playoff. So I think this game may not be as close or competitive as people think if Michigan's passing game is legit.
Yeah, I think that Michigan's going to take care of business pretty handily. You do have to wonder what kind of role all the drama plays. Like, these players are getting asked about this constantly and everything too. They're asking about their connection to Connor Stallions and all this stuff. They going to use it as motivation, or is it going to be a distraction? That's kind of the question. But yeah, Michigan's schedule's been shit. And obviously Michigan State is really down this year. That would normally be a much bigger challenge for them than it was this year. But now that we're in these conference alignments, they didn't have Iowa scheduled. They don't have a Wisconsin or something scheduled. Wisconsin's kind of down anyway. So terrible out of conference, Eastern Carolina, UNLV, and Bowling Green. That's all they scheduled.
And it's just a down Big Ten. And despite a lot of preseason hype, it's really a down Penn State team. This offense is one of the weakest that James Franklin's put out there.
Well, now on to what should be a good SEC matchup between two top 15 teams. Both are 7-2, both 3-2 in conference, and that's Tennessee at Missouri.
Yeah, what's interesting on this is Tennessee's favored by 1, total of 58. Most of the money's coming in on Mizzou after that good game at Georgia, where they hung in there. Talent-wise, Tennessee is much more talented than Missouri. Scheme-wise, they've had a lot more consistency under Josh Heupel than Missouri has had until really this season under Drinkovitz. And so I lean Tennessee in this game. This is the kind of game that Tennessee usually puts up legit numbers. Luther Burden, the star receiver for Missouri, is a bit banged up too. He's kind of their whole offense at times. They do have this fun little running back that's managed to put up big stats. which has been new for Mizzou in recent seasons. But I think Tennessee is going to dominate this game is the way I lean. Now, it does set up well. Tennessee's got Georgia on deck at home in Knoxville, and Georgia's playing Ole Miss at home. So, if Georgia rolled Ole Miss and Tennessee got upset by Missouri, you might be able to get really good odds on Tennessee next week because I think they're going to give Georgia a better game than they did last year. And obviously, they've been a little hit or miss, which was going to happen with Milton at quarterback. His inconsistency has limited the passing game. They've had some injuries in the wide receiver core as well. But the running game has been great. Run defense has been great. Pass defense for Tennessee has been pretty solid. Talent-wise, they have the edge. Coaching-wise, I think they have the edge. I think what is basically a pick-em game, I lean Tennessee.
I want to staying in the South, not the SEC. We got Miami, who this game could have been something else if Miami hadn't gone on that. Maybe that one game could have changed things. That one terrible call to not kneel it down. Who knows what could have happened? Could have kept momentum going, everything. But now Miami's sitting there at 6-3, 2-3 in the conference, and they're headed to Tallahassee to play Florida State.
And Florida State's looking at the playoff. They're favored by 15 in this game, total of 50. So that, they're projecting something like 32-17, something like that for Florida State. A pedestrian Miami offense, because it's been really sporadic, not clear whether Van Dyke is going to play in this one or not, though some people think that wouldn't necessarily be a downgrade given his up and down performance on the season. The Noles at times have, this is obviously one of the great rivalries now for 4 decades. And to see it have this big a spread is really something, but that's because in some of these games, like last year, Florida State beat the daylights out of Miami. I think the Canes in this situation are a dangerous underdog. They're talent-wise, they're as talented as this Florida State team. This is not a talent. Florida State's offense is stacked with talent. Its defense really isn't. It's a little hit or miss. They got a couple of good players and a couple of average players. Miami's defense is actually more talented than Florida State's. Its offense could be better than it's performed. That would be the big question. I think Miami's defense will come to play. The big question will be whether Miami's offense has enough to give them some hope and some life and make it a competitive, fun game like this series used to be historically. The Cane fans would love to go in and knock Florida State off and derail their playoff bids. It's probably a long shot to occur. The public is leaning towards Miami getting that many points, but there's some others that just don't think this Miami team is competitive under Cristobal, especially when he, lost the script with that bad loss to Georgia Tech that you mentioned, and then, followed that up with a bad second half against North Carolina, and then lost last week after beating Clemson and North Carolina State. But this is a team that beat Clemson. It is a team that beat Texas A&M. And even though both those programs are down, they're very talented programs. So I think, and Florida State is the same Florida State that almost lost to Boston College early in the year. So it's not like they automatically rolled no matter who their opponent is. So I'm hoping for a close competitive game. Cristobal needs a close competitive game because if Miami goes off the tracks again in his second season, the doubts in South Beach are going to grow about whether they made the right coaching choice.
Yeah, I certainly wish this could have been like the matchup for the ACC title. I think that would have been really exciting. That's what a lot of people expected maybe halfway through the season. Not so much anymore. Another game that has big implications for conference champion, potentially, they need some help. Oregon is hosting USC. USC, Caleb Williams, after crying on the sidelines, losing 3 of their last 4 weeks, he's now headed for what maybe even a tougher matchup than what they faced with Washington. Obviously, Oregon lost to Washington earlier this year at Washington on a last-second field goal. How do you see this game shaking out?
So USC finally figured out, the head coach, Lincoln Riley, finally figured out he'd made the wrong defensive coordinator choice. After multiple bad defensive seasons at Oklahoma and now multiple bad defensive seasons at USC, finally let him go after he had just had like 1 or 2 good years at Washington State that were misleading. And that was clear. And after, they didn't have a problem scoring against Washington. They just couldn't stop Washington. And so the question is, with a new defensive coordinator, what might that look like for Oregon? From a pure talent, the spread is 15. The total is 73, up to 74. because so many of the USC games have gone over the total this year. So, they're looking, they don't think, the betting markets don't think that USC's defensive change will make any difference. They think USC is still going to Oregon's still going to put up in the mid 40s against them. I don't know if that'll necessarily happen. Even though Bo Nix has been on a roll, Bo Nix has been very good at home. Oregon's fighting right on the outside of a potential not only conference but BCS bid that they might be able to sneak in the back door if things roll a certain way, and they need a big win to help establish that. Talent-wise, USC is a little more talented than Oregon, and they're getting more than 2 touchdowns, and you got the former Heisman candidate everybody's disregarding on the road. This has been historically when teams like USC shock people. And this Oregon team is not so stacked with offensive and defensive talent that they can just roll anybody, anywhere, any place, or any time. So I think USC is a live dog in this one. Lincoln Riley needs them to be a live dog in this one. Caleb Williams needs a bounce back. The defense needs to show some confidence, and they've got a new coordinator to go with it, who Oregon hasn't seen their schemes all year because he's entirely new. So I think this game could be much more fun, engaging, high-scoring, close, and competitive than the betting markets expect.
Yeah, and it's not like Washington's got this thing locked up. They still got to play Utah. They still got to play, I think, Oregon State. So they've got some tough games left on their schedule. Oregon's probably sitting there looking at it, thinking they could still potentially be the Pac-12 champion, still find a way. They're still definitely alive for that college football playoff, no doubt. So I don't think this is a typical like sneak up on you game because it's USC, and granted they've lost the last 3, but still I think everybody's going to get up for that game. Everybody wants to beat Lincoln Riley and Caleb Williams and all that shit. So it should be a great game nonetheless. And speaking, we're not going to talk about the Washington game today, but we are going to talk about one last SEC game, and that's Ole Miss at Georgia, a 1-loss Ole Miss team, and a Georgia team who, with the exception of Kentucky, I guess, they've had some close calls. They've had some tough games in the SEC. Are they looking at another one on Saturday?
Yeah, we're going to, is this game going to be like the Auburn and Missouri games where Georgia let teams hang around, or more like the Florida game where they just smacked the opponent around? Georgia's favored by about 10 to 11, depending on where you get it. Total around 58. So they're projecting a score of like 34 to 24. Reflecting Ole Miss's explosive offense but weak defense, and that Georgia's offense has been efficient, if not consistently explosive, especially without their Heisman candidate tight end who's out with an injury. And so I think this will be a good opportunity for Georgia to bounce back. The public is about 90% of the public is on Ole Miss and the Rebs. This feels like one of those games where Georgia puts their foot down. I don't think Ole Miss really offensively, all their scheme and gimmicks is going to work against the Georgia defense. And that Ole Miss defense has shown vulnerabilities all year long, and Georgia's been sufficiently efficient, I think, to take them apart. I think they bounce back off of a subpar performance against Mizzou. I think Georgia, rolls in this one.
I think they definitely need a big statement. They did it in Kentucky, right? That was when everyone was like, hey, they've been struggling. They're going up against a, ranked Kentucky team, and they just kicked the shit out of them.
Yeah.
So I think
it reminds me of, like, I think it was last year or the year before, like Arkansas was coming in on a roll. Arkansas was hot, and I think they beat them like 36-6 or something. This is the kind of game where I think it's more likely Georgia rolls and gets trapped by Tennessee next week than they get trapped this week by Ole Miss.
Yeah. So we shall see some great games in the NCAA this week for sure. Let's move on to the NFL. We just talked about Bill Belichick, how there might be a little bit of a hot seat building in New England if he loses this game to the Colts. But that's who it's against. It's not exactly a home game. It's in Germany. I imagine there'll be a lot of Patriots fans there. There's a lot of Patriots fans in New England, or when they get played in England, ironically. But how do you see this game going? You obviously still got Gardner Minshew starting for the Colts, who are 4-5.
Yeah, the Patriots coming off a bad loss to Washington, the Colts coming off a bit of a misleading, at least in the score, win against Carolina. It's an early start in Frankfurt, Germany. I think there's a slight, I think you're right. In Europe, there's going to be more Patriots fans than Colts fans. So it might not be a purely neutral site game the way people might expect. The Colts are favored by 1.5. Most of the public is betting on the Colts. This is the kind of game New England matches up very well with Indianapolis. So Mac Jones can't throw against man defenses. So most defenses all year play a heavy man. The Colts refuse to play man defense. They just play zone. They won't play man. He's actually always been, Mac Jones, in his entire Patriots career, an above-average quarterback against zone defenses. He was at Alabama. His first read is a good read. And at Alabama, it didn't matter that his second read or third reads were terrible because he almost never had to worry about a second and third read at Alabama with like 6 NFL wideouts. So again, zone, he tends to do just fine. And that's what the Colts are going to play. And so I think they match up well. And then if you want a guy that makes bigger mistakes than Mac Jones, well, you got one in Gardner Minshew. You know, he's gonna throw a few balls up to the other team every game. New England gets to scheme for them. Their run defense has been fine. It's their pass defense has been hurt with the injuries. And the Colts have not. I mean, last week they averaged less than 4 yards per play against the Panthers. So I think this matchup actually matches up well for New England, and probably doesn't hurt at all that people are spreading rumors of Belichick might get fired if he can't win this particular game, to give just that little bit of mental edge to the Pats. So I kind of like the Pats to pull the upset.
Yeah, you would think that they would have been feeling that for a while. That Belichick would have been embarrassed enough with this performance this season so far. But you never know. Should be interesting. Jonathan Taylor, it seems like the longer he's back there, the better he looks, which I guess is what happens when you hold out a training camp for a lot of these guys. But early game, 9:30 on NFL Network. Now a team that, after starting 5-0, has had a 3-game losing streak. The San Francisco 49ers, and it's not going to be an easy game either, heading to Jacksonville, to Duval, to play the Jaguars.
Yeah, this is interesting. The 49ers looking like Super Bowl favorites to start the season, then hit a few hiccups. Favored by 3 on the road at Jacksonville, and the public still hammering the 49ers. So the public still believes in the 49ers. They still haven't believed yet in Jacksonville, despite the fact that Jacksonville's playing most of this season like they finished last season. I think the line is probably about right. I think San Francisco is one of those 3 or 4 elite teams in the NFL. A lot of bad luck in that Bengals loss, fumbles, tipped passes that defensive linemen managed to get for interceptions and things like that. 49ers at core, very good defense, very good offense, and in ways that Jacksonville hasn't shown the consistency for. That's probably the most the game most people are interested in watching this weekend is the 49ers at the Jags. But I think the line is about right. Total's around 45. So they're predicting like 24-21. That kind of makes sense as a final score. So I don't have any strong lean either way. I think the public hammering the 49ers actually probably gives a little bit of value to the Jags, who might go off at 3 and a hook or more. Then they may have some value, because the Jags are going to be as excited about this game as anybody.
Well, Debo should be back. That's big for them. Trent Williams is still a question mark. He's still questionable. That is huge for them. Obviously, we've seen that him not being there for them, that just guaranteed one of the best tackles in the game not being there for them, both in the run game and the pass game, has really hurt them. And Brock Purdy has been exposed a little bit over the last couple weeks as not just some robot. So we'll see if they can get after him and move him around. They can definitely make him struggle a little bit. The Jags are fun to watch. They are. I like Trevor Lawrence, and I like the weapons he has surrounding him and how they're being utilized. I feel like this is really a year that they're taking this next step, and it's great to see.
Definitely. I mean, Calvin Ridley's a good fit, and Doug Peterson was a great coaching hire.
You can tell Calvin Ridley, he wants the ball. He's clearly going on FanDuel before the games and, doing some prop bets. Like, there's no doubt Calvin Ridley is he's partaking a little bit of that. Now headed to LA, again, a home game. It's not really a home game anytime the Chargers are there, but the Lions are headed to play the Chargers. Chargers coming off a win against, they played the Bears last week. I think they did.
The Jets.
Or Jets. Sorry. It was the Bears and then the Jets.
Yeah, exactly. And the Chargers, despite a bad offensive game, pulled out a relatively easy win. Now they get the Lions, as you note, kind of at home. Lions are favored by 3, total of 48. So they're thinking, 25, 22, 26, 23, something like that. That's the Chargers defense has been picking up a little bit and not playing as bad as they started out the season. I have doubts about their head coaching staff, but the Lions favored on the away from home against Justin Herbert. I don't get that. So 2/3 of the money's coming in on the Lions. I lean the Chargers getting the points in this situation, even though it's more like a neutral site game than a home game. It's not like Detroit fans are the best traveling fans in the world. This isn't like Pittsburgh or New England or Green Bay or anybody or San Francisco, and it's all 49ers fans. So it'd be more like a neutral site game, maybe a slight lean as some Chargers fans start to pick up in LA. But I don't think they should be getting 3 at home to golf.
Yeah, it's tough because it's hard to bet on the Chargers for anything this year. Obviously, the last 2 games against inferior competition, they played very well. But until that point, it seemed like the same old Chargers. Play well, somehow lose. But I don't think the place can be packed with Lions fans like SoFi when it's Steelers or Packers or Raiders, obviously. I don't know if Lions fans are going to be packing the place out, just a guess. But on to what may be the worst game of the week. Falcons who, made a change at quarterback. Looks like they're sticking with Taylor Heineke. Heading to the Cardinals, who are, I think they're going to be starting Clayton Tune again.
Oh, no. Supposedly it came out early this week that he's
going to play?
He's back. Kyler Murray
officially?
Officially. So,
okay.
I thought he was going to be back last week. Lost money when a Tune showed up in Cleveland. Should have known that there was no chance they were going to risk Murray coming back against Cleveland's defense. Wait to play at home against Atlanta instead. Atlanta's favored by 1.5, total of 44. Most of the money's still pouring in on the Falcons because nobody believes in Arizona. But if Murray's back, Arizona should probably be the favorite in this game. I get Heineke is doing decent with Atlanta. Still, I was never a believer in him at Washington, not a believer in him now. I just think Ritter was a mistake. So they just went from one mediocre quarterback to another mediocre quarterback. If it was Clayton Tune, I wouldn't touch the game with a 10-foot pole. That guy, how some of these quarterbacks are in the league, like him and Tommy DeVito at the Giants. These guys, DeVito wasn't even good in college. He was bad at Illinois. He was bad at Syracuse. How is he on an NFL roster? How is he starting for an NFL team? It's mind-numbing. So, we'll see. That's why that spread's almost 17 points for the Cowboys. And there's people still betting it up. 90% of the tickets are on the Cowboys, even at 16.5.
So here's the thing that I don't understand. And I did yesterday, they made it official that as long as there's no setbacks with the injury, Kyler Murray's set to start. Here's the thing I don't understand. If I'm Arizona, why do you want to win? You know what I mean? Like, I don't see them sticking with Kyler. Why do you? Well, I've heard some people say, well, they want to play him to use him as trade bait in the offseason. I think you're better off just leaving him as he is. It's not like Kyler's had a rough season, but he's mostly just been injuries for him. That's been the problem for him. I don't understand why you run him out there and potentially give up an opportunity. Like, what if he goes 3-3 in the next couple games and you're sitting there like the 8 or 9 pick? Now you're really fucked. I just don't understand that from them.
Yeah, I assume it's because down deep they want to see if he's their future, given how much they've invested in him, is my assumption about what's going on here. Given especially that they let Dobbs go and traded him to Minnesota, who turned around and won a game for Minnesota without having one practice with Minnesota, and then he goes out and wins a game. So I think that's probably what's going on in that direction. But yes, there's an argument that they should just let sink the whole season and get the best pick under what is clearly a lost season anyway.
Yeah, they're 1-8. I don't get it, but hey, I guess we'll see what happens.
Good for the Bears, right?
As long as, again, I'm praying that the Bears beat Carolina, because I could just see a situation where they don't, and they somehow, lose to Carolina. The Cardinals continue losing. They end up with the number 1 pick. That'd be the worst thing in the world, but that's what the Bears would probably do. Either way, I'm probably going to get a quarterback who paints his nails and cries on his mother's shoulder on the sidelines anyway. So kind of just typical Bears. But let's head to another team who thinks they've got their quarterback situation figured out. The Cleveland Browns. Deshaun playing a tough defense. Reportedly, he's still going to play against the Baltimore Ravens.
Yeah, I mean, the Ravens offense started to pick up steam. This is, an old historic rivalry as the Baltimore Ravens are the former Cleveland Browns. Browns fans have clearly not forgotten, though Baltimore used to be the Colts before they became the Indianapolis Colts. So those fans have their own grievances. Baltimore favored by 6, total of 38. So respect for both sides of the defenses. They're predicting something like 22-16, effectively. That kind of score. 2/3 of the bets are on Baltimore, and almost everybody thinks it's going to be low scoring. About 80% of the tickets on the under, despite that being a relatively low under for NFL purposes, not so much for NFL purposes this year. I think it could be a more interesting game because, Watson's back. Baltimore Ravens defense has been a little bit up and down. I get they had a great week last week, but I'm not sure that's going to be a consistent thing. It's not like they've been a 49er-style dominating defense. And the Browns, while a dominating defense, has been much more dominating at home than they've been on the road. People can remember that Colts game where Gardner Minshew moved the ball up and down against them. So I could see this game being higher scoring than expected. And I think the line's a little heavy for the Ravens at the moment. But part of that's predicated on believing that Deshaun Watson will continue to play well and not be the mediocre quarterback he's been most of the time in Cleveland.
Yeah, it's been interesting to see with this injury that he has, who he decides he's too injured, what week he decides he's just too injured and can't go, like when they're facing, I don't know, the San Francisco 49ers defense or things like that. But supposedly he's healthy. He's ready to go. He'll be back. That division right now, I think if the season ended today, every team in the AFC North would make the playoffs.
Wow.
Baltimore's at 7-2, and then Pittsburgh, Cleveland, and Cincy are all at 5-3. And that's with some of those teams. Pittsburgh, I don't know how Pittsburgh is 5-3. I don't feel like they played very well this season, but they're 5-3. Cincinnati, obviously, really struggled early on. Joe Burrow's come on, and it's just kind of like we've seen the last couple of seasons.
Yeah, every year.
Cleveland has barely had a quarterback. So it's like, I can't believe these teams are 5-3, but they'd all be in the playoffs if it ended right now.
I know, which is extraordinary.
We do have a super chat from the Greg for 5. Chip Kelly must go. Fire that bum Chip. Make UCLA great again. Is Chip Kelly
didn't look so great last week. We'll see if they bounce back as the season finishes. If they beat USC, everybody will be happy in Bruinville.
That's true. And we got a comment from Tafka Day. It says, you guys have obviously not been paying attention to Lions road games.
He thinks the Lions have been the Lions did well against the Chiefs.
But he says they were like 40% of the crowd in Green Bay and have had sizable crowds in all the road games.
And things are going to travel crisscross the country to LA.
Yeah, maybe what I'll say. The Green Bay,
I don't think it's going to be more than half the crowd, though.
Yeah, exactly. That's the thing. Usually, a lot of times,
49ers or Raiders, it's all 49ers or Raiders fans. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, and I'm not going to sit there and say, Lions fans don't travel, but I will say Lions Packers is, I think it's the oldest continuous rivalry in sports. I think Bears Packers might technically be older and like more games played, but I think in terms of every single week games have been played, every single year games have been played, I think it's Packers Lions. So that's a massive rivalry game, and it's pretty close to Detroit. So I'm not surprised.
And of course, they bought up Packer tickets the one year they think they could beat them. So, you know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah, Aaron Rodgers is gone. Let's go play Jordan Love.
So see what that looks like. I think my free bet of the week is actually going to be those Chargers catching 3 points. I just think that Herbert. If I look at this as Chargers Lions defense about even, despite Chargers being up and down, so have the Lions. And so that means you're really looking at the quarterbacks, and you're looking at Justin Herbert versus Goff. And I've never been a big Goff fan. I think in the right system, right scheme, like in the Lions, he can play well. But who out there, if you were drafting a team, would take Goff over Herbert? So why am I going to take Herbert catching points? Or why am I going to take, why not take Herbert catching points? So I think the wrong team is favored.
Yeah, that is an interesting. I mean, Jared Goff, when you look at the last these couple of years of the Lions, he's played damn well. He really has. But it's indoors, great offensive line, great run game helping him out, and some good weapons for him as well. It's a very good situation for him. But you got to give him credit. He's been really good. He's been real a lot better than I think anyone expected him to be when he made that move to Detroit. He's been really solid for them.
Well, it's probably one of the great up and coming coaches, the offensive coordinator there. I think it's if that offensive coordinator leaves, watch Goff go back to be an 8-8 quarterback.
Yeah, that's true. Justin Herbert, I don't know if he's still going to be playing with that thing on his finger or not.
Yeah, apparently is, but at least it's not his throwing hand. So
yes,
that's
just
a
looks
tough
funny.
dude. That dude's just a gamer. You can tell him he's like Josh Allen, like Mahomes. What's fun about these young quarterbacks is that they're gamers, they're competitors. They want
like
to do
to
it.
play.
Yeah, Allen got the penalty for waving at the Bengals guy for pulling him on the run. I like that. I like that kind of mindset. Like Kelly in Vegas was saying, Allen reminds her of Brett Favre. I was like, yeah, I love Brett Favre. Yeah, I get he's going to throw some picks. He's going to take some undue chances. He's going to think he can make a magical throw that he really can't. But then he'll make the magical throws that nobody thought he could. And they're just competitors. And Herbert is a fierce competitor. And Goff is a solid quarterback and can be good in the right system. He's just still not Justin Herbert. And for him to be favored away from Detroit, I'm not buying it.
Yeah. We'll see what happens in that game. Should be a good one either way.
But for those still in the Survivor League, the obvious pick this week is Dallas Cowboys. That'd be if you haven't taken the Cowboys, this is the week to take the Cowboys.
Yeah, the Cowboys as well. They are a team that you never quite know what they're going to get, but I think you can certainly bet on them against the lowly Giants. And that's really rough news to hear about Daniel Jones as well, going down with that ACL tear over a nothing burger.
It was so weird. You watched it live, and there's like, what? I mean, you could figure out he was hurt, but it was like the Aaron Rodgers injury. Though Rodgers is claiming, maybe if the Jets can hold on long enough, make it to the playoffs, that he'll be back. He said it'd be a few fortnights to Pat there, but that'd be amazing with an Achilles injury to be able to come back that soon. But I think he really wants to prove that he was worth the investment. And so if the Jets can somehow, I mean, the Jets are somehow 500 and favored on the road without him. But usually this is when the Zach Wilson wheels come off. In the second half of the season, people figure out whatever scheme they're trying to run. And the Chargers, the defense played great. They held Herbert to like less than 150 passing yards, and they still lost by 3 touchdowns because the offense is atrocious. I mean, that's a team that should have lost to the Giants a couple of weeks ago with backup quarterbacks in. So I just don't. I don't know if they can make it long enough for Rodgers to come back. That'd be a heck of a comeback if he did make it then. And my futures picks on the Jets would still have a chance if he somehow made it back.
It seems outlandish, and a lot of things would have to happen, including the Jets somehow making it in the playoffs, right? But the fact that he's out there taking like 3 or 5 step drops and slinging the rock is wild. Obviously, it's all part of this new procedure that they've developed that has, I think Cam Akers came back from an Achilles tear in 5 months. I think that's the lowest time they'd ever seen, which is remarkable. That's like half the time of even like the most quick recoveries that we used to see for Achilles. Now,
And
Cam
it's not
Akers
like
tore
he
his other ACL last week, or his other Achilles last week, which sucks.
Well, it's not like Rodgers has to run as much as almost every other skill player out there. Yeah, he puts pressure on it to throw, but that's kind of it. It seems more. I mean, what was it that Mahomes had? Did he have a partially damaged Achilles and he played the whole half with it in the playoffs last year or the year before? Yeah, didn't he have some damage, something to his foot?
Had to be his ankle or a foot. I couldn't imagine.
I thought it was like they didn't know how much it was damaged, but I thought it was an Achilles injury. Just wasn't like fully torn.
Well, so I think you're going to start seeing people be a little bit more careful with these calf injuries and stuff like that. Because I think Kirk Cousins as well, who his was almost exactly like Rodgers in terms of what happened. But you get these guys who have these like nagging calf injuries. I think that was a big worry for Joe Burrow as well earlier this year in the off season, and really limited him for a while. But Aaron Rodgers had a nagging calf injury in training camp. Well, it turned out it was probably just like a little partial tear of that Achilles. It's probably what that was. Right. And then you get out there, you right at the right time, the thing will just snap.
If he makes it back, it'll be a sign that the unvaccinated have an edge.
That's true. He's out to prove it. He's going to prove Mr. Pfizer wrong. So the Greg for another $1.99 says fire Chip Kelly. I'm sure We'll see what if they lose to USC. You might get your wish, buddy. But that's going to do it for us this week. Robert, once again, if people want all of the games from this week and all the different tricks, not just in the NFL, but basically every sport, where do they go?
So if you want to put the odds in your favor and get the most affordable, accessible handicapping information anywhere, there's no better place than sportspicks.locals.com. Profitable on the year in college football, pro football, European football. Won big bets last year on all the major events: Super Bowl, college football final, European soccer final, NBA finals, college basketball final. So you can get all of that at Sports Picks. There's also, you can join for free and get all the free picks put up by a range of people: Major Wedgie, Cricket, Cody, Smokehouse Mike, and others who have also been putting out profitable picks all year. Fun teaser bets, prop plays, you name it. So you get lots of free information, free insight. You can join the live chats in the weekend where we give out free picks. I do a live Q&A every Friday, answer every question that comes in. So the best place to put the odds in your favor, sportspicks.locals.com.
There you go. Lily Ramsey for 2. The Falcons should draft Bo Nix. I definitely think the Falcons need a quarterback. They're probably going to
fit their scheme. I just still don't see Bo Nix as an NFL quarterback outside of a really unusual scheme.
Well, anytime you have a guy go 5 years in the college, right?
Well, in year 6,
he's in year 6, I think, because of COVID, right?
Yeah.
It's usually because if they would have gone to the NFL draft, probably wasn't much there for them. So that's kind of the question you have to ask yourself. Bo Nix having a great year, an insane year for a very talented team.
Great stadium, the loudest stadium because of how they designed the stadium in all of college football, even louder than Neyland and some other places. So it should be a good week in college football. I'm hoping the USC-Oregon game is a fun, close game, not a blowout. I know Duck fans would be just as happy with a blowout, maybe happier with a blowout. But with a lot of Ole Miss, Georgia, Penn State, Michigan, some big top 10 matchups that are going to be defining in the year. And we'll see if, Belichick can bounce back for the Patriots, whether Murray is back to healthy with the Cardinals, whether or not Deshaun Watson is legit in that division rivalry against the hated Baltimore Ravens for Cleveland fans. So it could be, and, wouldn't surprise me if Packers go in and upset the Steelers with that two great historic franchises up against one another, and a Steelers team that probably should have 2 wins on the season, not 5, as you mentioned. So it should be a fun week in football this weekend.
Yeah, should be great. So make sure you tune in. And we appreciate you guys watching the stream here and on Rumble. And we'll be back next week for some more picks and previews. Have a good night, everybody. Talk to you later.